Alright guys, we got this Ford Explorer here, and what we're doing with it, it came in with a belt squeal. And while taking an initial look at it, we found that the harmonic balancer pulley had actually separated. This had slid back far enough that the serpentine belt was riding on the inner rubber portion of the pulley. So I've already torn it down, as you'll see in a little bit later clip, to get the harmonic balancer out off the crankshaft down there in the bottom. So I've already got it torn down, and I'm getting ready to put it all back together. So what you're going to see from here out is the actual teardown and then the reassembly. Okay, this is not something you see very often. I don't know if you can see down there on the bottom where the serpentine belt's running, right where it says Motorcraft. The pulley is actually back behind it. And I'm trying to get you in a spot where you can see it a little better. But the harmonic balancer, I do believe, has actually come apart down there. Oop, there we go. And the belt has somehow or another managed to run itself off the pulley and is running on what's left of the balancer where the pulley should be. So I'm going to take you through trying to pull the balancer off of this. This is a Ford Explorer with a 4-liter, and I'll see if I can't take you through pulling that off and what we've got going on with it. So be back in a bit.
What you're seeing right now, I'm just taking the serpentine belt off, and all it takes to do that is you could do it with a long 3/8 drive ratchet, or a 3/8 drive and a cheater pipe, or you could do it with a serpentine, but it is a 3/8 square hole. So I will just take the tension off the tensioner and then slide it around the idler pulley, and that'll give you enough slack that you can release the tensioner. Now I've moved around and I'm coming in from underneath, and I've got a large pair of slip joint pliers that I'm just grabbing the end of that harmonic balancer pulley with. And then it is a 18mm, if I remember correctly, bolt that holds the harmonic balancer in place. And I've just got a half drive breaker bar that I'm going to break it loose with. And then I'll get back in there with the socket, a ratchet, and actually back it out. Now you have to leave the bolt partially in to pull the balancer. There is like a washer in the middle of the balancer that is built in, and you cannot get the nose of the puller through the hole and still have anything to push on. So you have to leave the bolt partially in. And where I ran into trouble later on was that I didn't get the bolt far enough out the first time, so I had to take the puller off, and the holes were corroded, and when I went to put the bolts back in, I broke one of them. Now at this point, I'm going to remove the fan shroud and the radiator fan. Been a little easier to get the balancer bolt out if I'd have done this first, but either way it still worked the same, and I didn't lose a whole lot of time doing it. It's just two 10mm bolts, and you take those two out, and then you can pull the upper half of the fan shroud out. You don't have to remove the lower half for this, but you definitely need to get that out of the way because you cannot get the fan out with the upper shroud still in place. As I will reiterate again later when I'm putting it all back together, it is a 36mm for the fan clutch nut, or basically the nut that holds the fan on. And I'm actually using the same big pair of slip joint pliers again, just to hold the fan pulley while I get a hold of it with the nut, because I couldn't get in there. We do have a holding tool that'll go on the bolts for the pulley, but I could not get in there with the holding tool at the same time that I had the fan nut wrench on that one.
All right.
Okay, here I'm just getting the puller set up, and the puller bolts for this are a 7/16 18, I believe it is, just a national course thread, but they do have to be fairly long. I don't remember what the exact length on them was, but it'll depend slightly on the pulley. The mistake I made is I wasn't paying real close attention, and one of the bolts that I grabbed was a grade 2. It wasn't a hardened bolt, and apparently the first time I ran it in, the holes were a little corroded, and I must have cracked it, and I didn't catch it when I pulled it back out. And when I went to run it in a second time, I snapped it off. So, keep that in mind when you do this. Make sure you're using a hardened bolt. That way, if you do have to put a little tension on them, since they are fairly long, you won't snap one of them off like I did, because that makes the job a lot more difficult.
Yeah. No. Hello. I had a feeling that was coming today. I mean, it's bounced some of these waters, no reasons, but it was 4 degrees when I left this morning. Well, there it is. I'm not going to be able to do anything until I get off. And I'm just going to have to probably stop by Home Depot or Lowe's and buy one of those basically kerosene diesel fuel torpedo heaters, just to get a good hot underneath that trailer to get it thawed out. Because that's, I mean, honestly, you could go over there with a heat gun or hair dryer and you could spend fucking 3 days over there trying to find a frozen spot. And you're just not. Well, honestly, all the water lines in that trailer should have heat trace on them, the exposed ones to keep them. But I'm guessing that one of the heat traces must have either gotten loose or come off, or somehow or another it's gotten jacked up. And so we're going to have to find that and fix it, because even with the panels up, you're not going to contain enough. I mean, on a 40-degree night, it's still going to drop well below freezing on that trailer. I mean, the only other thing she can do that would help keep them from freezing up is when we get it back on, leave one of her faucets running at just a very slight trickle. Because as long as the water, which is kind of, I mean, that does happen when it gets this cold. There's nothing you can do. So, to get it thawed out, I mean, even if I put panels up, there's still a good chance that the damn thing's gonna freeze again tonight. I mean, because you can't contain enough heat. Does that make sense? Hello? Yeah, sorry. I'm not on my phone like that. Don't know, and I honestly don't know. You know, and the problem is if it's frozen solid, which I have a sneaky suspicion it probably is at this point. Then no house either. If there's any kind of wind blowing or anything else, you're not gonna get enough heat out of it to get it broken out. Hang on. Yeah, I did. Sorry, you there? So.
Okay, so here in just a second is where this job is going to become a lot more difficult. On this harmonic balancer, you have to leave the bolt in and actually push the pulley off using the bolt, or using the bolt to push on with the puller. Now I had to remove the puller once already to back the bolt out more, and when I was putting the puller back on here in just a second, you're going to see me accidentally snap one of these bolts off, and I was not torquing on it at all. As I found out after I broke it, the bolt that I grabbed to use was a grade 2 and not a hardened bolt. There it went, right there. And with that length of a bolt, that grade 2 bolt broke in the balancer. There's no way for me to get in there and get the broken stub out. So, long story short, you're not going to see it in this clip because I actually shut the camera off. I was getting so frustrated later on. But we had to get underneath the truck with a pry bar and an air hammer and keep bumping the backside of the pulley until it finally came off. So, needless to say, it did get a little bit more difficult. But all said and done, here in just a second, I'm going to cut to the clip of the reassembly.
Rates to whatever air pressure is. Oh God.
Put the balancer back on, and I'm using a little bit of the Permatex Ultra Slick Assembly Lube to lubricate the area that's going to ride on the crankshaft seal, the front seal. That way it doesn't run dry and burn that seal up when we first start the engine. That stuff works great, but you definitely want to make sure, even using motor oil to lubricate that area that's going to ride on that seal, helps out a lot. And it'll save you time in the long run, not having to pull it back off to replace the front seal.
So I can see what I'm doing.
And it is a little bit easier to slide the balancer on from underneath because you can actually see the keyway, and it's a little easier to get lined up. But now that I got that on, I slid the bolt into the hole, but it's not far enough on yet for the threads to start to engage the end of the crank enough where you can use the bolt to pull the balancer the rest of the way in. So the best thing to do here is I'll grab a dead blow, and you can't hit it very hard, but you can just tap on it, and the press fit is not real tight initially, so you can slide it back enough to get the bolt started. Then once you get the bolt started, just get in there with your socket on a ratchet, and you can start pulling it in. To see here is I've got my little quarter drive snap-on ratchet, and this is where I noticed earlier in the video, and I pretty much confirmed it here, I'm having issues with it. So it's going to get warrantied out. Now if you watch, it has stalled. I'm hitting the trigger, you can see the little work light flash, but it is not coming on and producing any power at all. So every time I squeeze that trigger, it should be doing something. Every once in a while it'll twitch, or it might hit once, but it just pretty quit operating properly. What you're going to see now is me reinstalling the crank sensor. I removed this when we had to use the air hammer to bump the motor off, so that it would lessen the risk of being broken in the process. And I just took the 2 bolts out of it and tucked it back off the side out of the way. So now I'm just putting those back on. Once I get it installed, we'll get the vehicle back on the ground and start putting everything together that needs to go together from the top.
Now, this pulley, the bearings are shot in. I don't know if you'll be able to hear that on video, but that thing should go about 3 revolutions and stop. It shouldn't keep spinning like that. And I think this pulley is actually where the belt screw was coming from. We just happened to find the other one in the process of looking.
You're going to need a 15mm socket to remove the idler pulley bolt.
And you make sure you save the little retainer tab that goes on the back to put on the new pulley, because generally they're not going to come with it. And then you've got the little washer on the front. Oop, sorry, the retainer tab off the back, the washer from the front, and a little bushing that goes in the middle. So yeah, that's the difference between the old one and the new one. By put a dot right there, and then spin it. You see, it only goes a couple revolutions. That stops.
Reinstalling the serpentine belt. If you lace it around all of the pulleys except for the idler, once you apply pressure to the tensioner, you can just get the idler and it goes on nice and easy. Then just check your alignment to make sure you're tracking properly on all the pulleys.
Our fan goes on next. And it is a 36mm. Oops, sorry. It's 36mm on the fan clutch nut. Just to double check, we'll give it a couple good whacks with a dead blow, and that'll tighten it up. And the fan actually turns the opposite direction of the way the nut on the clutch or the hub runs. So it will tighten the fan. You know, it won't spin it loose, it'll actually tighten it up. Alright, now, fan shroud.
Alright guys, now I'm just getting everything, the fan shroud button back up. Nothing out of the ordinary. So really this is a pretty cool job. It is a little bit in depth, but you don't need any really special tools to do it, other than maybe the pin clutch nut. And if you had to do that yourself, you could get that as a loaner tool from an auto parts store. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys found it helpful. Please give me a thumbs up. Drop me any questions you have in the comments section. Click the subscribe button for me, guys. And if you don't mind, share this video. Throw it up on in your Facebook feed or something. Just share it around the internet for me, would you please? And I hope you guys have a nice day, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you.